Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm Scott Lauber, and I write about the Phillies in Major League Baseball, and I host this show each and every week. And no matter how you found us, whether it was at Inquirer.com, the Inquirer's YouTube channel, Facebook, or X, or by listening to our podcast on Apple or Spotify, I'm so happy you're here, and I want to thank you for spending some time with us. These are busy days in the Phillies' little corner of the world. Just in the last week, since our last show, Trey Turner went on the injured list with a strained right hamstring. Kyle Schwarber became the second player in franchise history to hit 50 home runs in a season. And the Phillies pulverized the Mets and grew their NL East lead to double digits. The show is coming out on Friday, a few hours before Walker Buehler will make his Phillies debut at Citizens Bank Park. But I'm reminded of another Buehler, Ferris, who famously said, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you might miss it. So that's what we're going to try to do here. We're going to stop, look around, and take stock of how the Phillies are coming down the stretch as everyone braces for another Red October, which has become a regular occurrence around here since 2022. We'll talk about the implications of Turner's injury, the magnitude of Schwarber's power, and, we'll preview the big three-game series coming up at Dodger Stadium. But before all that, my guest this week is one of only two pitchers to get the final out of a World Series for the Phillies. It's Brad Lidge, and he's one of my favorite people that I've come across in 20 years of covering Major League Baseball. He's smart, he's thoughtful, he's always gracious with his time. I'll share a quick story. If you're listening to this, you probably know that Lidge had the year of his life in 2008, going 48 for 48 in save opportunities, including famously striking out Eric Hinske to end the World Series. But if that season was a dream, 2009 was a nightmare. Lidge had knee and elbow problems and a 7.21 ERA. He lost the closer job late in the season, then got it back in the playoffs. And in Game 4 of the World Series against the Yankees, with the score tied in the ninth inning, he gave up a two-out single in a 9-pitch at-bat against Johnny Damon, who then stole second and third on the same play because nobody was covering third. By the way, when we're finished here, I encourage everyone to go and watch Damon's double steal on YouTube and see if you recognize the Yankees' third base coach. I'll give you a hint. He now manages the Phillies. Anyway, with Damon on third, Lidge had to be more careful about throwing his signature slider in the dirt. He hit the next batter, then gave up a go-ahead double to Alex Rodriguez and a two-run single to Jorge Posada. The Yankees won the game and took a 3-2 lead in the series, and later, in the clubhouse, Lidge stood at his locker and took wave after wave after wave of questions. Why was nobody covering third? Who should have been there? Was he rattled by the double steal? Where was the pitch to A-Rod? And on and on and on. And Lidge stood there the whole time, giving answer after answer with candor and insight. He confessed that the Phillies never practiced for that scenario, an overshifted defense in which the third baseman had to take the throw to second on an attempted steal, and nobody was covering third, so he didn't know whose responsibility it actually was. Well, finally, someone from the Phillies PR staff intervened, like a boxing referee who mercifully stops a fight. But that's Lidge, honest, insightful, accountable, available in the good times and the not so good times. It's one of the reasons why I love talking with him, and I've been thinking about him a lot ever since the Phillies traded for Jhoan Duran at the trade deadline, because Duran is the first true closer the Phillies have had since Jonathan Papelbon. And considering they never had a winning team during Papelbon's tenure, Duran has a chance to be the most impactful closer here since Lidge. There are similarities, too, between the circumstances of their arrivals in Philly. The Phillies got Lidge in a trade with the Astros before the 2008 season, and he was the final piece of the puzzle to vault them from making the playoffs in 2007 to winning the World Series. 17 years later, the Phillies obviously hope that Duran will be the final piece for a team that has made the playoffs 3 years in a row but fallen short of winning it all. So I wanted to ask Lidge about Duran. We talked about 40-year-old David Robertson, who was with the Yankees in 2009 and is the last active player from that World Series. Lidge can relate to Jordan Romano's struggles, So we discussed that too and more. If you stick with me after our conversation, I'll open my reporter's notebook, as always, and get into everything that's going on with the Phillies. And I'll take a listener question at the end. But let's not waste any more time. Here's my sit down with former Phillies closer, Brad Lidge. Brad Lidge, welcome to Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to catch up with you a little bit.
So first, before we get to the Phillies or really anything related to baseball, I have to ask about your other passion, archaeology. For people who don't know, you have a master's degree, right, in Roman archaeology. And I know you're about to get started on your PhD. And you spent a lot of the summer in Italy, right? The town of Merlo, to be specific, in Tuscany, where I think we were talking off camera. You worked with a guy named Anthony Tuck, who's a Philadelphian from the UMass Amherst. Tell me a little bit about, you're kind of like the real life Indiana Jones, right? If Indy also had 225 career saves.
There you go.
Can you give me any highlights, I guess, from kind of like your summer abroad and sort of take us there and kind of put us in the situation that you're in and kind of what you're working on?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a long, hot summer of excavation, and we're in Tuscany about just maybe less than a half hour south of Siena. So like it's about an hour and 15 minutes south of Florence, and it's really good wine territory. So that always works well for everybody. But I've been working at this site. It's like a pre-Roman site, and we continue to find some important features, new walls, and different aspects of the site every year. It's the site is from about 800 BC to about 500 BC. So we find all kinds of amazing objects and artifacts, and we're not just out there looking for those, but boy, when you find cool stuff, it sure makes it more fun. I was there for most of all July, and then got back a little bit early from that, and I think we'll talk a little bit about it. Had to see one of my buddies out, get elected to the Hall of Fame and be out there in Cooperstown with him, of course, Billy Wagner. But every summer I go out there, I supervise an area and help out the students. It's a field school, so I'm learning and I'm working on my own publishing and papers, but I'm also teaching a field school of archaeology to students from UMass Amherst, but also from other Ivy League schools, and really, frankly, from schools all around the country.
Okay, so I got to ask, compare the adrenaline rush of, I'm not going to say striking out Eric Hinsky to end the World Series, because I would assume the equivalent of that is like discovering an entirely new ancient civilization, right? But like closing out a game, a major league regular season game, striking out the last batter, and, kind of uncovering kind of an important 2,800-year-old artifact that helps us better understand the ancient Roman culture and civilization.
Well, I'll try and give it a comparison. I don't, in terms of the amount of adrenaline, of a Major League Baseball game that I have a good feeling or good chance that I'll be pitching in. Nothing quite compares to that. Even pretty much anything I've done, post baseball, nothing really gets you on that same, mental page, so to speak. But certainly when we're starting to uncover some, crazy artifacts and something starts to appear out of the ground, and it's going to be a significant or important artifact, you take a step back and take a deep breath and realize that, it's world history that you're uncovering, and it's important for a lot of people, not just in the area, but, generally speaking. So there's a little bit of adrenaline that happens there. It's a little bit of a rush for sure, but I don't think I could compare it to, closing a Major League Baseball game.
So you work with, we mentioned his name is Dr. Tony Tuck, right? And he's from Philadelphia. Right. And you said he's a big Phillies fan and Red Sox fan. Is he, right. You've known him now for a little while, right? Like, does he ask you baseball questions and you're asking him archaeology questions? Like, is there kind of you're more fascinated with his field, he's more fascinated with your field kind of relationship there?
Yeah, we've been friends for a little while now, and he'll text me all the time, different baseball questions, because he watches the Red Sox now, but of course he went to UPenn and loves the Phillies as well. So we'll talk about a lot of things. He actually has a pretty good knowledge of baseball. It's just little anecdotes here and there that I like to fill him in on, and of course he has a very robust knowledge of all things world history, but especially Etruscan and pre-Roman and So yeah, I'm constantly asking him questions, help with papers, and we're coming up with topics, and we go back and forth, and we've published a few things together. But it's typically great conversation. I know enough about world history now to be able to ask him intelligent questions, and he knows enough about baseball to ask me intelligent questions. So it's great. We have a great back and forth for sure.
That's awesome. There are so many reasons why I like talking to you, whether it's about your career or what's, going on in the game now. And I have to say, in getting into a little bit of the baseball side of things, I was thinking about you a little bit after the Phillies traded for Jhoan Duran, because, you weren't a trade deadline edition. You came over obviously in the offseason, the 07-08 offseason. But when the Phillies acquired you from the Astros, they were in a similar stage of their organizational life cycle. They were a playoff team in 07 and didn't really have a closer. They moved Brett Myers to the closer role, but he was still very important to them as a starter. And they traded for you. They put you in the ninth inning, and all of a sudden, it felt like the bullpen was more organized. It had a little bit more structure to it. They could kind of work from the back forward, knowing that they had someone in the ninth inning. From a distance, I wonder if you've sort of gotten that similar vibe with the Phillies now, because they didn't really have a closer. They acquired Duran, and now they can sort of move everybody up a notch, whether it's Orion Kerkering or Matt Strahm, or now they have David Robertson, and maybe the bullpen has a little more structure. Do you see some similarity there?
I think so. I think structure is really essential for bullpens, and I know that a lot of teams get to the postseason without a bona fide closer, and are able to piece together games and have different strategies. But boy, it really, when you've got an established closer and you can slot everybody in behind him, or I should say in front of him, it really shortens the game, and it makes life a lot easier for the manager, and for the coaching staff, and for the players on the field to have that confidence that, hey, if we have the lead after 5-6 innings, this game's over. And I think bringing Duran in there really kind of gave the fans and the rest of the guys in the bullpen that feeling. So yeah, I do see some similarities that way. And I think, it's interesting, the stuff that the Phillies have in the bullpen now in terms of guys coming out of there, it's electric. Obviously Duran's a lot of fun to watch, and for me, for sure. So I'll compare it, the bullpen much more favorably now, I think, to what we had in 08, because now you can kind of see the pecking order, the clear areas where certain guys are going to be brought in, whether it was, Madsen and JC Romero or Chad Durbin, whoever in front of me. Now the Phillies have those guys set up in front of Duran as well. And they're all great. I mean, they're all going to get out there and do their job 9 out of 10 times, if not more in some cases. So I think it just gives, it just gives everybody a lot more confidence that the recipe for the postseason, there's a few things you got to do. You got to be able to hit, you got to have great starting pitching, and you have to be able to count on your bullpen to do its job. If you're in a 7-game series, just about every single night. And like I said, it should give the fans a lot more confidence that they're going to be able to get that aspect done this year.
The other thing that kind of reminds me of your situation when you came over was, you came to Philly and you had some postseason experience as a closer, some good, some not so great. But I mean, you had, I think, 5 or 6 postseason saves with the Astros. You pitched in a World Series, which means, you stood on the mound and you'd gotten the last out of a playoff game. And Duran did that with the Twins a couple of years ago. He closed out a series for the Twins in the wild card round in 23. Is that important, especially when you come to a ready-to-win team, and you're looked at as maybe the finishing touch on that team, that you've sort of been there, done that already when you get into October and you're not sort of new to that environment?
Yeah, I think it's very important. Honestly, the very first playoff game I ever pitched in felt a little bit to me like the very first game I ever pitched in, which is to say, like, heavy legs when you're running out there on the mound and you've got this overload of adrenaline. And yeah, so it's really nice to have some experience under your belt. And I think, in the case of Duran, having done a little bit of that, I don't think that he will, I don't think he'll miss a beat at all when it comes down to the postseason. I think he'll just kind of go right back in there. Yeah, he's going to have a little more adrenaline. Yeah, the fans are going to be going nuts. And that first game to, close it out in Philadelphia is going to feel the environments in the atmosphere is just going to be incredible. So, it'll be up to him to take a deep breath and control that. But I really haven't ever seen anything from him that says he won't. So, I think he's going to go out there and do a great job like he's been doing. His stuff might even be a click better in these circumstances, because if you do know how to control that adrenaline and you do know how to kind of take that deep breath, it can elevate your game even to another level. But it really helps to have some postseason experience going into it for sure.
So closer to closer, like when you watch Duran, like obviously the velocity is off the charts, and he's got that splinker, that splitter sinker combo. What sticks out to you about watching him? I don't know how much you've watched him, but when you've seen him, is there anything that kind of jumps out at you?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a couple things. I mean, I've watched him pitch over the years, and I've watched him pitch a few times now with the Phillies. And I mean, obviously his stuff is incredible, but to me, it looks like when hitters get in the box, they're gripping that bat tight, and they're like, I just got to try and put the ball in play. I mean, it doesn't, to me, like there are a lot of closers in the game, and I'm sure myself included, where you get up there and that hitter's thinking, if he throws a first pitch fastball, in this part of the plate, I'm going to launch it, and if you make a mistake, you're in jeopardy. But the thing with Duran is, even if the hitter is thinking that, and even if they get the timing right, the movement is such that they end up breaking their bats a lot of times and really putting the ball in play with hardly any exit velo. So for me, watching him pitch, the confidence is high. He attacks hitters. He attacks the strike zone. And I think he knows, like, there might be a game or two where they can string together a few singles, and they might score a run every once in a while by doing that. But if he goes out there and he's pumping strikes with his movement and velocity, he's going to get so many bad swings and so many, the infield needs to be alert when he's pitching, because they're going to have a lot of kind of soft contact coming to him. And I think it's awesome to watch. I mean, you just want to have your closer. The one thing, regardless of your movement and your stuff and everything else, the one thing is that you want somebody that's going to go out there and attack the hitters, get them, get ahead in the count, and then put the pressure on them. In the postseason, if you're falling behind guys as a closer, it's just a recipe for disaster, because you don't want to groove anything in important situations. So if you're falling behind, you might have to walk guys. You put guys on base. All kinds of stuff can happen. But he doesn't put guys on base that way. He attacks hitters, and so it's really fun to watch.
Duran's got his, I call it a cinematic entrance, right? The lights go down and the song comes on, and you get the flames and the tarantulas on the scoreboard. Your generation of closers was kind of, I think, at the forefront of some of that with the music, especially. I think of Mariano and Billy Wagner had Enter Sandman, right? And Trevor Hoffman had Hell's Bells, and Gagne had Welcome to the Jungle, and I think Papelbon had Shipping Up to Boston. And when I think about you and Citizens Bank Park, it was that song, the Drowning Pool song, right? Soldiers.
That's right.
I think it was, with the siren at the beginning. And I wonder now, if when you watch guys like Duran and Edwin Diaz with the trumpets, I mean, how much do you think of like how closer entrances, how far they've come in the last 15 years? And is there a part of you that's like, boy, I wish we'd had maybe some of the technology and the ability to be as theatrical as some of these guys
are? So first I would say it is pretty damn exciting to watch, Duran come out there. And I know for Mets fans to watch Edwin Diaz and hear the trumpets and everything else. I don't know if I would have liked to have, all that going on. It's cool, and you get this level of respect, when you're a bona fide closer and you go out there and, however your entrance song is, it's fantastic. If you're like a Hall of Fame caliber guy and you can really kind of dial that in and everything else, and, then it just becomes even more amazing. But I don't know. You want to get out there and get the job done, and if you're going to have a big entrance like that, you better make sure you get the job done for your fans at home. But the one thing I would say also is that it does bring a certain level of kind of adrenaline and excitement when you're closing at home. Like when I was closing in Philly, and that song started playing, and the fans got on their feet, I felt like I could run through a brick wall. So there is certainly something to it that gets you going even more as a closer. But I don't know where it's going to end up, but I think we're probably at a good point where it's really cool. The fans are really into it. I don't know if you need to do any more.
I wonder if the guys before you, like the Gossages and the Raleigh Fingers, were like these guys with their entrance songs, and
Oh, I'm
and
sure.
of course now we're
I'm
like these
sure.
guys with their tarantulas and their the lights go out and all of that.
Yeah. Well, it's cool. I mean, look, there's always going to be kind of an old guard and an old school thought. I mean, Goose Gossage obviously was notorious for saying these closers today throwing one inning at a time. What's
Right.
going on with that? So there's always going to be a little bit of that, but no, I think it's really cool. I'm excited for them, and look, if you can get all the fans behind you, and you can get the whole stadium rocking, I think it makes it even tougher on the other team in most cases. So, more power to them.
We were talking about Duran and how like the bullpen has fallen in line behind him. They did acquire another reliever as well. It was just before the deadline. It was David Robertson. He signed with the Phillies in July, a few weeks before the deadline. And it's kind of crazy to think, right, that he was part of that Yankees bullpen in 2009 in the World Series against you guys, and he's still going at age 40. You're only 48, and I can say only because you and I are the same age. What goes through your mind when you see Robertson still doing it, still getting hitters out at his age and his 17th big league season? He's probably the last. He's certainly the last guy from the 2009 World Series. I think who's still going.
You'd think so.
I think.
Yeah.
I know there's no one on those Phillies teams. So, kind of what goes through your mind when you see that?
I'm extremely impressed. I think you have to be blessed to get to the major leagues in a lot of different ways, but to be able to stay in the major leagues, you got to be blessed in a situation with your body where it doesn't break down, and that's not really anything you're going to control a lot of times. I mean, especially when you're getting out there every single night like he is, throwing inning after inning, game after game, over 10 years, 12 years, 15 years. For him to continue to do it is a marvel. And I really don't think, there's a handful of great, relief pitchers in this game that don't get their due, and probably will always have a hard time making the Hall of Fame because they don't have the save totals. But nonetheless, I look at him as a class of super special relievers that deserve to be in some kind of Hall of Fame. Respect for those relievers and all the holds he has besides all the saves. I guess in short, I'm extremely impressed that he's able to still go. I know he takes care of his body. I know he's a great athlete, but that there's also a lot of luck involved in that. And to his credit, he's controlling all the things he can. And then he's been very fortunate to have, an arm and a body that allow him to do it. So good for him. I hope he keeps going. I hope he plays a big role for the Phillies down the stretch and in the postseason. And really, I think of David Robertson as a guy for me that, like, if I was a Hall of Fame voter, there guys like him I would be paying attention to. He's never going to have the save totals, but boy, he's been incredible for such a long period of time. And I'll tell you, when I was 40, I mean, I would throw batting practice to my son and his team. And granted, I wasn't on as many probably anti-inflammatories as I was when I played, but every single day, the next day I'd be sore. So I don't know how he's doing it.
Yeah, it's remarkable to think too. Like, he went home after last season, and he could have signed in the offseason, didn't. He decided to wait and kept his body in shape. I mean, if I had like quit and gone home for the first half of the season, there's no way, there's no chance. Like, I'm not saying like I've never been in the situation to do that, but like there's no chance. I think a lot of guys would say that they could have come back in the middle of the season and gotten hitters out. So he's pretty incredible. Another guy I need to ask you about really quickly is Jordan Romano. I think you were still hosting your show on MLB Network Radio when he was closing for the Blue Jays and doing quite well. He signs here, and look, like, it's amazing to me some of the similarities to you. Like, you're both fastball slider guys. You're both two-time All-Stars. You're exactly the same size, 6'5", 210 or so. And, he's kind of gone through sort of, I think, some of maybe the nightmare season that you went through in 2009. The difference, of course, is that, he didn't have 2008 to precede it for you. And he didn't close the door on a World Series the year before, but it hasn't been an easy go for him in Philadelphia. And I'm just curious, like, as an accomplished guy who struggled through a season like that, like, what would you say to a guy like him? And, because, you also, in 09, you came back off of that and you had 3 saves in the playoffs, right? I think you saved game 1 in the NLCS in LA and pitched in the World Series and, really in some ways salvaged a lot of that season and then came back in 2010 and had a really good year. So I guess kind of what would be your advice to a guy like Jordan coming off this experience?
Yeah, I think, sometimes you just have to do whatever you can to get through a certain season. And, you don't want to change who you are too much. You're going to have 1,000 people, season like that telling you 1,000 different things. But you just got to remain confident. I mean, that's the entire thing, is just remain confident. It seems like in years like that, anything and everything that can go wrong will go wrong. And, you swear you're making the same pitches as the year before. And this year guys are, getting hits or whatever the case. Certainly when he goes home this offseason and he's able to hit that reset button, and I remember this in 2010, going out there and all of a sudden you're just like, the first couple games pass by and you get some easy outs and you're like, wait, why was this so hard last year? Like it's you scratch your head. Baseball does that to you, here and there. And you just got to kind of keep your confidence and keep grinding through. And you got to be smart when you're pitching too. And so I think for him, just continuing to fight and battle through the rest of this year and contribute however he can to the team. I mean, they're still going to need him, of course. He still has the ability to get a lot of guys out and do it, and do it well. And then once that kind of starts clicking, and I remember for me toward the end of 09, I started feeling better in the regular season. And then in the playoffs, it was like, hey, I look up on the scoreboard, my ERA is 0. Like, this is great. Like, I can start fresh now. So, so for him, just he's just got to maintain who he is and not think too much about it. Easier said than done. It will reset. And, if it's the postseason and it takes that 0 ERA and whatever the case, and next year, I'm sure will be a much better year for him.
Okay, let's wrap it up with this. I mentioned Billy Wagner's name earlier. He's a friend of yours. He was a teammate of yours in Houston. He obviously preceded you as a closer in Philadelphia a few years before you got here. He's a friend of the show. We had him on in July, a few weeks before his Hall of Fame induction. And Cole Hamels earlier this year told me a great story about going to his first big league camp in 2004 and playing catch with Billy and being terrified that
you don't want any part of that.
that he wasn't going to catch it, literally. I guess, first of all, what was it like pitching with him, being a young guy coming up, pitching in the same bullpen with him? And I guess, do you have kind of a Billy Wagner story that kind of pops to mind when you think about him or talk about him?
Well, I mean, I have a few incredible stories, about him just in general and about being a teammate with him. But I will say, just to pile on what Cole Hamels was saying, I was like, I'm going to take this as a personal challenge because Billy Wagner, everyone knew about the second, every day we go out there and play catch, and about the second throw, he was already about 90, 95 miles an hour. And, you're closer than 60 feet at that point. So nobody really wanted to play catch with him. Plus, he hides the ball. He's got that crazy arm path and everything else. And so, I took it upon myself as a challenge. But I remember one day, I think we were in San Francisco, and there was this gleam kind of coming off the seats. And, we're playing catch, and he threw a ball, and I never saw it. And it just went right by, like, I never even put my glove up. It just went right by, like, I could feel it by my ear. And then all of a sudden, it hit the seat behind me and, like, blew up the seat. I remember thinking, and that's it. And Wagner was like, all right, next guy. Like, that was my chance to, that was 2002, the year I got called up. That was my chance to, be his catch partner, so to speak. And, I failed miserably about the second attempt there. So, but yeah, Billy was such a great guy. He taught me almost everything I knew as a young reliever on how to get out there and be prepared day in and day out. I don't think people realize how flexible he was and like how he took care of his body and how mentally he would grind through it every single game. He always told me that's the reason he lost his hair. As soon as he became a closer, his hair left. So he took it incredibly seriously. He had a passion for it. And of course, his last season, I mean, he could have played 5 more years and been at a lock for the Hall of Fame, I think, in the first or second round. But, he chose to be with his family, which I have a great deal of respect for. And just thank God he ended up in Cooperstown where he belongs and enshrined with the greats of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it took 10 years. I was a staunch Billy Wagner voter, kept voting for him and hoping he'd get in. And I think obviously it's well-deserved. And just, you look at the numbers and they're historic in terms of like batting average against and just, you talk about a guy who was just playing hard to hit regardless of the inning, regardless of the situation. Impossible to hit. And, it was, the strikeout numbers were incredible. And, just a guy
when you see, when you look at the numbers of other Hall of Fame hitters against Billy Wagner, and for me, when I watch those guys swing and miss his fastball by a foot, like I was like, this is something you don't see every day. These are the best hitters our game has going to the Hall of Fame, and they can't even see his fastball. It was a different animal entirely.
How about, being on the other side of the Phillies Mets? So, in 08, like 07, the year before you got to Philly, and then 08 was kind of, for me, the height or the peak of Phillies Mets, when it was really at its high point as a rivalry. And he's the closer on the other side. And he probably, he had some history with some of the Phillies guys in terms of playing with them and then playing against them. It had to be interesting to kind of watch him and see him from the other side of things after being his teammate all those years earlier.
Yeah, I mean, wherever he went, I think everyone knew just how difficult he was going to be to hit. And, when I was, followed him in Houston as a closer, he was closing for the Phillies. When I, closed for the Phillies, he was closing for the Mets. So I always got to see him and talk to him and hang out with him over the years. And I think that really did, a lot for our friendship and strengthen our bonds even more, because we were always going against each other. And obviously he, started 5-6 years before I did, whatever it was. And he ended up playing for a long time, even though, like I said, he could have played 5 more years. But, I was always kind of following him around and picking his brain and watching him go about his business. But, to your point, wherever he was at, even if he didn't have, as much success as people were anticipating, which it feels like he always did, but the numbers were always insane. So like at the end of the year, he would put up these totals where you just scratch your head and say, man, every year he gets it done. Like there was one year in Houston where he was injured, where his numbers don't just jump off the page, but like otherwise every single year he pitched, wherever he pitched, he was dominant.
Well, Brad, this was a lot of fun, as it always is every time we get a chance to chat. It's my 20th year covering Major League Baseball, and you were someone who, every time I talked with you, I always felt like I learned something or came away understanding the game a little bit more. And you were always available too, which, look, I'll never forget. I tell people all the time, I'll never forget you standing at your locker for wave after wave after wave of questions after Q4 of the World Series in 2009. And I appreciated how generous you were with your time then, and appreciate it still. I know you've got a lot going on in your post-baseball life, and so we wish you all the best with that. And looking forward to seeing you for sure in October when the Phillies are playing some postseason games at Citizens Bank Park.
That sounds great, Scott. I appreciate it. It's always fun to talk a little baseball and archaeology and anything else. So hit me up again sometime.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being with us here and spending some of your time at Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Of course, I want to thank Brad Lidge again for joining me. Let's open up the old reporter's notebook and touch on a few things that have been on my mind this week. First, we'll start with Trey Turner. An MRI confirmed that he did, in fact, strain his right hamstring. That's the bad news for the Phillies, who had to put Turner on the injured list. Here's the good news. It's a grade 1 strain, according to the doctors, which is the most mild variety. Hamstring strains range from grade 1 to 3, with 3 being the most severe. So when Turner strained his hamstring last season, it was a grade 2, and he missed 44 games. This time, with a grade 1, it sounds like it'll be closer to 2 or 3 weeks than 6 weeks. Turner expects to be back for the playoffs, if not for a few games in the final week of the regular season. So the Phillies dodged the proverbial bullet, right? No doubt. But here's the bigger question, and I wrote about this earlier in the week at Inquirer.com. Will they get the real Trey Turner back in October? Or will it be a compromised version? Because Turner's legs are what make him special. He's still the fastest player in baseball, even now at age 32. Sure, he can drive the ball in the gap and hit it over the fence, but he leads the majors with 32 infield hits. Nobody else even has 30. A big reason why he's the only player in the National League who's batting .300. He's third in the majors with 36 stolen bases, trailing only Cleveland's Jose Ramirez and Pittsburgh's O'Neill Cruz. And he's made massive improvements defensively because he's utilizing his athleticism to create better hops and make the so-called routine plays more consistently. Turner came back from the hamstring strain last year and another in 2017. Both times, he swung the bat well upon his return. But he also was more cautious on the bases, understandably so. Last season, he didn't attempt to steal a base until his 15th game back. In 2017, when he also had a grade 1 strain, it took him 9 games before he turned it loose. In both cases, he had the luxury of easing his way back in. Those injuries occurred early in the season. Coming back now, either at the end of the season or for the start of the playoffs, there will be an urge to return at a full sprint rather than a jog. The day Turner got injured in Miami, I asked if he learned anything from his previous hamstring issues in terms of how he was able to come back. He said, quote, "Last year, I thought we did a pretty good job. I might have come back a little early, but did a good job managing it and putting that behind me. And I was running good by the end of the season. We'll do kind of that same thought process. I feel like that's where you trust the training staff and trust yourself. You lean on those guys in there and try to figure it out. So we'll see. We certainly will." Moving on, a few thoughts about Kyle Schwarber, who joined Ryan Howard in the Phillies 50 homer club. One of Schwarber's most appealing qualities is his self-deprecation. So only he would look over his shoulder as he passed third base coach Dusty Wathan on his way around the bases after hitting number 50 and yell, "Finally!" a nod to going the previous 10 games without homering. I also loved Schwarber's answer to whether he ever thought he would hit 50 homers in a season. Quote, "It's something that I wouldn't say I expected, but it's something that you try to strive for, right? You want to strive for reaching things that might not be attainable, because that's just the way you keep yourself going every single day." It's impossible, of course, to overlook the timing of all of this. Schwarber, as everyone knows, will be a free agent after the season. There were some contract talks between Schwarber's camp and the Phillies in spring training, but ultimately the sides agreed to let the season play out and pick up the conversation again in November. Well, in betting on himself, Schwarber has certainly delivered. In talking to executives around the league, it's difficult to imagine the Phillies letting Schwarber get away. JT Realmuto went to free agency in the 2021 offseason and wound up re-signing with the Phillies. Aaron Nola was a free agent for about 2 weeks after the 2023 season before the Phillies brought him back. Most people assume the same thing will happen with Schwarber, but there's going to be a market for him. Red Sox manager Alex Cora has already intimated that Boston will have interest. Schwarber grew up near Cincinnati, and when the Phillies played there last month, well, the Reds invited his father and one of his youth baseball coaches to throw ceremonial first pitches, a not-so-subtle sign that they would like to bring Schwarber home as well. Whatever the case, there's no denying that Schwarber has had a brilliant walk year. And it's interesting because the looming prospect of free agency has different effects on different players. Aaron Judge bet big on himself and hit 62 homers in 2022. Juan Soto parlayed a 178 OPS plus for the Yankees last year into a $765 million contract across town from the Mets. But other players feel pressure to perform in their walk year and wind up struggling. Pete Alonso, for instance. I asked Schwarber about it the other day. He said, quote, "I guess I just don't process it that way. Like, the way I process things is I just think about our group and I think about our team, and that's it. Like, you want to perform well, you want to do good and everything like that, but I feel like this. The more that you're able to dive yourself into your group and your team and worry about, okay, you're struggling, you can still help someone else out and might help yourself out, right?" I told Schwarber that sounds like a good way to ease the stress of putting up big numbers to set yourself up for a big payday. The stress, he said, is losing. It's not about I'm stressing over an 0 for 4 day when we win. I'm stressing about we didn't have a couple of good series in a row. What are we going to do? You know what I mean? Everything else takes care of itself, right? It's that outlook, as much as the 50 homers, that will make Schwarber attractive to a lot of teams this winter. Finally, the Dodgers and Phillies are about to meet again for the first time since April 4th, 5th, and 6th. And a lot has changed since the Phillies took 2 of 3 in that series in Philadelphia. Shohei Ohtani is pitching again, and he's lined up to start one of the games at Dodger Stadium. But Roki Sasaki has been out since May with a shoulder injury. The Phillies lost Zach Wheeler for the season, but still have Christopher Sanchez, fellow lefties Ranger Suarez and Jesus Luzardo, and Aaron Nola. Mookie Betts is finally on a tear after struggling, at least by his standards, for most of the season. And the Phillies are waiting for Bryce Harper to really start sizzling. The Dodgers were supposed to be a super team, right there with the best rosters ever assembled. Instead, they were playing at merely a 90-ish win pace going into the weekend. But so much has also remained the same. No disrespect to the Brewers, who have the best record in baseball, but Phillies-Dodgers still feels like, well, a clash of the National League Titans, and maybe even a playoff preview. Right now, the Phillies have the number 2 seed and to bye in the wild card round. They'd like to hold off the Dodgers, who are the 3 seed, and as it stands now, they would meet in a best-of-5 divisional round, assuming the Dodgers get there. The Phillies have been on a roll since the All-Star break and the trade deadline in particular. Maybe the Dodgers are less like the 1998 Yankees than the 2000 Yankees, a defending World Series champion that often looked bored while cruising to a division title in an 87-win season before turning it on and going 11-5 in the playoffs en route to another World Series. Say this for the Dodgers. They're getting healthy again with Will Smith back in the lineup and Blake Snell in a rotation that now includes Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Clayton Kershaw, Tyler Glasnow, and Ohtani. It's the most complete the Dodgers roster has been in months. Just in time for a visit from the Phillies. All 3 games will start at 10:10 p.m. Eastern Time, so you might want to sneak in a nap because it's bound to be must-see TV. Okay, it's time for our last segment. We call this Hit and Run, where we take a question from you out there. There are a bunch of ways that you can join the conversation. Drop me an email at slauber@inquirer.com. Reach out to me on the social media platform of your choice, X, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, or you can drop a question in the comments section if you're watching this on YouTube. This week's question comes in email form from Steve Hunt, who asks, quote, "What do you think has happened to Alec Bohm at the plate? He just doesn't look like the same hitter the past 2 years. He's not hitting with any power whatsoever and is hitting routine ground balls to the left side of the infield for outs." Steve, thanks for the question, as always. So we know now that Bohm has been dealing with some physical issues. For all the talk of Trey Turner going on the injured list this week, Bohm joined him with what the Phillies characterized as inflammation in his left shoulder. He was playing through it for at least a week, according to Rob Thompson, and felt it more in a September 7th game in Miami. So the Phillies decided to take Bohm off the field and give him time to recover. Bohm, like most players, hasn't discussed it publicly because he doesn't want to sound like he's making an excuse. I understand that. I also contend, and always have, that an injury is more of an explanation sometimes than an excuse. It stands to reason that injuries can affect performance. I think that's the case here. Bohm, as you will recall, also missed 27 games after the All-Star break with a fractured rib on his left side. So quite clearly, he's been compromised physically in the second half. Bohm also got off to a dreadful start, if you recall. From April 19th through July 12th, though, a period of 72 games, roughly 45% of the season, he batted .311 with an .809 OPS, and you'll take those numbers. Now, having said that, the disappointing part of Bohm's season has been his run production. By now, at age 29, I think we know he's never going to be a big home run hitter, but he drove in 97 runs in each of the last 2 seasons, in part because he filled the gaps with doubles and hit with runners in scoring position. Last year, for instance, he had 44 doubles and batted .301 with a .906 OPS with runners on second or third. This season, only 15 doubles and a .284 average and .754 OPS with runners in scoring position. I'm not sure the Phillies can explain the drop-off other than to say that injuries have played a part here. But you're right in saying that it's quite notable because when Bohm is going well, he can provide solid protection for Bryce Harper in the middle of the lineup. When he's not, well, the Phillies have to rely on JT Realmuto or Brandon Marsh or the tandem of Nick Castellanos and Max Kepler. And all of those guys are better suited to bat 6th, 7th, or even 8th in a deep lineup. The Phillies believe that Bohm will be back before the end of the season, perhaps even during this West Coast trip coming up. Whenever he returns, though, they definitely need more from him than they've gotten over the last 2 months and really over the season as a whole. Okay, we'll leave it there and let you know that every episode of Phillies Extra is available by going to Inquirer.com and clicking on the Inquirer Live tab or the Inquirer's YouTube and Facebook pages. That's always an easy way to catch up on any show that you've missed. You can also listen to this episode and many others on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And while you're there, please give us a follow, rate, and review us. We want to hear what you have to say. Thanks again to my guest, Brad Lidge. And thanks, as always, to our producer, Angelica Irizarry, for her great work each week in helping us put this all together. Most of all, though, I want to thank you out there for listening, watching, and, of course, reading the Philadelphia Inquirer. Enjoy the week, everyone. We'll see you next week.